everybody. Welcome to the Bituation Room podcast show stream situation. I'm your host, Francesca Fiorentini. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for deciding to press play, for joining me for a little bit. We have such a jam-packed show. This is like a particularly jam-packed show, and I say that every single week. But it's because, there aren't enough shows in a week, even though this is 1/3 of the show. I'm your host, Francesca Fiorentini. Thank you so much for being here, for pressing play, for, choosing to spend the next little while with us. Comedian Josh Gondelman is here back in the Bituation Room. We're going to be talking about things that could use a little, comedic bent to them, as they are so dark and so heavy, namely Israel really, and for serious this time, trying to do regional war and bring World War III to fruition. Biden obviously letting him do it, letting Netanyahu do it, and others. We're also going to talk about Sean Combs. That's right. He's just going to be Sean Combs from now on. None of these, unless we can think of a very fun little pity pun for Mr. P. Diddy, who is now in jail. Likely in the same prison or the jail that I was held in when I was arrested at the RNC in 2004. That'd be very exciting if he was, in which case he's going to have to shit in front of other people. And I love that for him. Although he might like that. We're going to talk about Puff Daddy. We're going to talk about Sean Combs being arrested, his home being raided, and what Donald Trump is trying to get out of this. What? Because he is somehow trying to make this about Kamala Harris. And then we are going to be joined by a journalist and author who specifically covers the climate for so many outlets. Kate Aronoff is back. Really excited to have her on. Going to talk about why Kamala Harris is running away from previous stances like a ban on fracking. But what more importantly will be her plan for mitigating climate chaos, for actually putting us on some sort of path to, living normally. So stay tuned for that. And then finally, it's been a week of non-endorsements of the Harris-Walz campaign, to many people's chagrin. A lot of infighting, interesting stuff. So we're going to talk Teamsters, Uncommitted movement, and of course, Chappell Roan, and where all those people stand when it comes to Harris and Walz and why. So do not go anywhere. You're going to want to stick around. But for now, remember, wherever you're listening or watching to this show, you can immediately support it for free by liking, sharing, and subscribing on YouTube, becoming a subscriber on Twitch, but also giving the podcast 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening to it, giving the podcast a 5-star review. Writing something real sweet would be super helpful. It helps people discover the show. And if you're so inclined to truly support for just $5 a month, $10 a month gets you that shout out during the fart song. Become a patron of the show. Patreon.com/bituationroom. I cannot stress how much of a difference all of the members of the Frantifa make in this show. And they enable me to do 2 more shows this week. Tuesdays and Fridays, of course. That Friday is the Fantastic Friday, and Wednesday is just for y'all. Wednesday is just for the patrons. You can stream it free, but if you miss it, you want to watch it back, patreon.com/bituationroom is where you go to do that. Always fun content, always, extra little stuff, and as well as the Ask Me Anythings. We're going to do another one very, very soon. So send me all your hot burning questions and I will get to them. And also, I would be remiss not to say you get 20% off all merchandise that is 100% union made. If you're not a member, however, you can still get 20% off your merchandise. I mean, you could still get your merchandise. You don't get 20% off. You can still get your merch, bituationroom.com. We got Frantifa shirts. We got tote bags. We got stickers. Again, 100% union made, and I hate to I'm not going to put anyone on blast, but most of your favorite shows do not have union made merch. There's a bug on it, like a union bug, not, you know what I'm saying? And so wear it proudly, and yay to that. And with all of that said, You can also tip the show, TBR-Live on Venmo, TBR Live on Cash App. Let's get into it, people. This is What Are You Bitching About? So it's been a bit of time since the Foghorn Leghorn, the segregationist Looney Tunes character, John Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, grilled her name is Maya Berry, who's the head of the Arab American Institute, during a hearing about hate crimes against the Arab and Muslim community. Here was just a little snippet. I'm not going to subject you to all of it, but maybe you have seen some of this.
You support UNRWA and Hamas, don't you?
I think it's exceptionally disappointing that you're looking at an Arab American witness before you and saying you support Hamas.
You know what's disappointing to me?
I do not
You
support
can't
Hamas.
bring yourself
I do
to
not
say
support Hamas.
You don't
or
support UNRWA. You don't support Hamas. You don't.
I was very clear in my support for UNRWA.
Hezbollah, and you don't support Iran. You should hide your head in a bag.
You should hide your head in a bag is how he ended that, which is funny because it just, sounds real ISIS of him. That just sounds, I mean, look, there's a reason we say Al-Qaeda, there's a reason that people draw that connection between the extremist right in this country and the extremist right in every country, which has no respect for any religious minority, which has no respect for women, and which will openly be Islamophobic and hateful in the middle of a Senate hearing on hate crimes specifically. The reason I'm bringing that up is because it's not just that, but it has been this entire week, as we'll talk about, this assault on Gaza, this genocide expands to Lebanon, and Israel remains unchecked. The other thing that remains unchecked, although we are all supposed to search our bodies for any kind of anti-Semitism that might be growing, that like it's under the bed, or, maybe our cat said something weird, or like, maybe we should police one another. Like, we are so on our P's and Q's about anti-Semitism, obviously to the point where we criminalize Palestine protesters. But when it comes to anti-Arab and anti-Muslim racism and Islamophobia and bigotry, we have no leadership actually holding people accountable. We have no one remembering the names of the people who were murdered, the Wael al-Fayumi, the 6-year-old who was murdered outside of Chicago by a neighbor because he's Palestinian. Like, there is absolutely no leadership when it comes to the rampant Islamophobia. And this week, in continuation of the theme, you have political cartoons where Rashida Tlaib is being blown up by a pager, or a pager is going off, and she's like, oh, that's funny. Because, of course, let's go after the Palestinian congresswoman. And, of course, Jake Tapper had to get in on that, and Dana Bash, too, and CNN, basically, when they're accusing Rashida Tlaib of suggesting that the only reason that Palestine demonstrators are being targeted is because the attorney general is Jewish, which she never said, literally never said it. Now they're spewing it on national television. So what I'm trying to tell you is this. What I'm bitching about is in the year 2024, we have so clearly and so painfully and so embarrassingly never actually learned the lessons of the bogus war on terror. Yeah, everyone's like, oh yeah, we shouldn't send money abroad, and that was stupid, and I guess we shouldn't occupy another country unless, of course, it's Gaza, and, Biden wants us to do it, But the real lesson was the rampant Islamophobia, the rampant clampdown on our civil liberties that truly never went away, right? But was absolutely greenlit if you were, again, Arab or Muslim. We still in this country, every single racism, bigotry, all of that, it is generally frowned upon, right? They're generally frowned upon. If you say something, say it behind closed doors, unless you're in a MAGA rally. But when it comes to Arab and Muslims, you can be an anchor on national television. You can be a sitting senator in a hearing on hate crimes. You can be the most prominent person out there. You could be an actor and still keep your effing job. as we've seen. Kill them all. Everyone needs to die. They're animals. No, anyway, so my next job is I play this like single mom. Like that is perfectly computable and compatible somehow in our warped ass racist country. So we're going to talk about the Uncommitted movement. We talked about him last week. We're going to talk about him at the end of the show. But there has been no inkling that the Democratic Party specifically really does care about the amount of hate being directed towards Arab and Muslim Americans. There's just no sign. And it is on, people like Maya and people who are, the head of CARE, or the Council on Arab and Islamic Relations. It's these leaders who have been carrying the torch, hope against hope, and still work to defend Americans from hate crimes, from violence, who documented. These are the only people we have. The only people we have are the Rashida Tlaibs and the Ilhan Omars, who, despite every death threat, continue to fight. So I'm just disappointed, man. I'm disappointed in all of us, and I am definitely disappointed in the Harris campaign. But it's not on her. It's really on it's on a culture. It's on a culture that normalizes this, and it's truly disgusting at this point. And we have a lot of work to do. So that's what I'm bitching about. And I hope we need to project Senator Kelly, project Senator Kennedy into the sun. That's it. Just bye later. Before I bring in my next guest, very excited to tell you, God, I needed this last night, and I did. I took my Sunset Lake CBD Goodnight tincture that has CBD and CBN oil because I could not sleep. I had I don't know, alcohol's so overrated. You guys ever, maybe it's because I'm older, but it's like if I have a drink a minute past 9 p.m., I can't sleep. And it's fucking dumb. Anyway, if you need to relax a little bit, you need to chill out, you need to have a productive but chill afternoon or morning even, Sunset Lake CBD is my suggestion to you. They have craft CBD gummies, tinctures, smokables, also fudge, coffee, and salve for your aching muscles. Again, I use the Goodnight oil, which is so wonderful. No psychoactive properties, y'all. Just pure relax, body, mind, soul. Mwah. It again allows me to sleep. Also, they have Goodnight gummies that have melatonin in them. Wonderful lotions, and they're a great company whose values align with ours. They've donated so much to Planned Parenthood, to bail release funds, and the list goes on. So, sunsetlakecbd.com, coupon code Frantifa, Frantifa, for 20% off your entire order. You can also subscribe. You can ask them questions. And they are great at responding to you. So they also have you can try a number of gummies. They're wonderful. Support them. Support this show. sunsetlakecbd.com. What are you waiting for? I've got to say, what are you waiting for? Because I literally don't know how to do an ad read without saying, what are you waiting for? So what are you waiting for? And with that, let me bring him in. Writer, comedian, who recently worked as the head writer and executive producer for Deezus and Mero on Showtime. Prior to that, he was at Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and his debut stand-up special, People Pleaser, is available to stream right now. Please welcome Josh Gondelman. Hey. Josh, unmute yourself, my friend. Oh, I still can't hear you, but I'm sure whatever you're saying is so sweet.
Now, am I here now?
Yes. Welcome, Josh. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. It's so nice to be here and audible finally after several technical hiccups in the span of 10 seconds. Delightful to see you.
Good to see you. I'm sorry I always start off kind of I'm in a shitty mood. Come in, guest, and make me feel better.
No, that's okay. I appreciate it. There's a lot to feel bad about.
Ugh, too much. And I'm the real victim here.
I've
Josh,
always said that.
Yeah, every time anything happens in the news, you're
yeah.
Oh, Francesca's the real victim in this one.
She's suffering. Check in on your friends who are Francesca because they're having a tough time.
Thank you. Thank you. I like that.
Of course.
Josh Gondelman, what are you bitching about this Tuesday, end of September 2024? I cannot believe we're already here.
I know. So before, I know we're gonna get to some heavy stuff later. So before that, I want to really call back to the halcyon days of last Friday when
Ooh.
we learned about North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson's alleged porn, and not just habits, but porn commenting habits, which goes so much deeper than just watching porn. It's the difference between watching a movie on cable and being like, I gotta open a Letterboxd account and let Chris Evans think. And his this is what is so. Oh, sorry, please.
No, I was just
What were
gonna
you
say,
gonna say?
like, yeah, I think there's a very particular profile of the people who comment on porn sites. I don't know like, tell me what you think that person is. Obviously, it's someone who doesn't change their username when they run for
Right.
fucking
His
office.
username is him. His email is the same. So he denies it. He's like, I didn't leave these comments with on a porn site, which is called Nude Africa, which I don't want to make fun of the name. I don't know how important Nude Africa is to the Black community at large. I don't want to besmirch it just because Mark Robinson seems like a bad dude. But he said his email address was linked to it, and his like handle that he uses across social media was linked to it. And he says it wasn't him. Someone impersonating him left comments, and that's fine. And he said, people were keying in on him saying like, I'm a perv. And it's like, look, if you like porn or, whatever floats your boat or fucks your boat sexually, that that doesn't hurt anyone, I think that is fine.
Sure.
However, his porn comments were directly contradictory to his political stances on a shocking amount of issues. Number one, he said referred to himself as a black Nazi and said that that we should bring back slavery. That's kind of not so far outside the norm of Republican politics in 2024. That doesn't surprise me. He also talked about how much he enjoys pornography with transgender performers.
Yep.
And I think, again, that's fine. I don't want to belittle adult performers of any gender identity. I will say he's penalizing people who use bathrooms that do not align with the gender they've been assigned at birth, or sex they've been assigned at birth, excuse me. And so, again, a direct hypocrisy. He also said in these porn comments that he doesn't care if a celebrity has an abortion as long as he gets to see their sex tape, which is another stance that strays from GOP orthodoxy because his boner supersedes his politics. And it's like,
but like, there's a fine line between, I think, your boner and your campaign slogans. Clearly, like, I feel like half of Republicans are just telling on themselves. They're just like, this is my kink, what's yours?
Yeah. Whatever the opposite of my political platform is, that's what gets me so horny that I have to leave comments and find community with other people about what gets us hard, or wet, or hard and wet. I don't know. But it's like kind of amazing that it stopped there, because I think like it's like he stopped just short of being like, wow, that guy has more than enough meat to satisfy everyone, if you know what I'm saying. And by that, I mean America's 1% has hoarded too much wealth and they should be taxed at a sufficiently high rate to fund social programs, ensuring that no one goes hungry at night. Or like, look how many people are inside her. That's amazing. Which makes me think that maybe our immigration system should be less focused on keeping people out at all costs and more focused on how to safely and successfully integrate people on the inside. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so like, it is just like so wild that he has a full, or whoever this was, wink, wink, has a full shadow political platform that is just based on like what makes him come, that contradicts like his truly repugnant politics.
That is so funny. Yeah, that's how, because it was so on the nose, to the point where even the site Nude Africa, which I hadn't heard of, but for someone
No,
who is,
it's not. I don't have that one bookmarked.
yeah, so I mean all the bookmarks, but like, of it's just so on the nose for someone who like really wants to bring slavery back to be like, and my favorite site is Nude Africa. Like, and again, it's just like, these people need to live their truths. Like, if his truth is just to be super domed by like some white lady and pretending like they're living, you know, on a plantation, that is fine. Like, no one is judging you. The problem is when you actually want to bring the plantation to politics and into real life.
Right. I mean, it really is wild how much so many of these guys seem to just like be running away from their own balls when they're making politics. Like
Yeah.
there's like it's you know
Which is
they
hard to do. You can't really
I
escape.
know. That's the problem. It always comes back to you if you forget to make a burner email account. And that's also, I know this was a long time ago that he made these comments, over a decade. I've had for that long probably a burner email account just for fantasy basketball. I'm like, I don't want this in my regular email. It's where the Gap thinks my email is. It's like I give all of them that email, and this isn't even illicit stuff. It's just a clutter issue. And he's like, no, I get to get notifications from my porn sites pronto. They have to come to my main feed.
Oh God, I know. I don't have enough burner emails. I'm like, I think I need to set up more. But anyway, that's a good thing to bitch about. We did talk about that with Laverne Cox on Friday. Hope everyone listened. No. Oh my God. It is the story that keeps on giving because Josh, he hasn't gone anywhere.
Nope.
He's not.
Oh, and that's it. His
down.
staff has quit. His like chief advisors, his head advisors have quit. And he's just like, no, this wasn't me. And I deserve to be governor.
Even though I've openly been like, you know, I've openly said slavery's fine and we should go back to a time when women couldn't vote.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's get into our heavy topics. A lot of things happened this week, but only two big ones. This is the week where. So this was the week where Israel decided to expand its war or genocide to Lebanon because that will bring the hostages home, or the sausages, as we will soon find. After exploding pagers and walkie-talkies that killed dozens last week or earlier this week, Israel is now on an all-out bombing campaign of southern Lebanon. It struck 1,300 targets, killed almost 500 people, wounded 1,600. Also targeted Beirut. And one of the people that was killed in eastern Lebanon, if you're like, gee, I'm sure they're all Hezbollah, which is a legitimate political organization, just like Hamas is, but we don't want to talk about that, so that's fine. One of the people that was killed in eastern Lebanon was this woman, Dina Darwish, who was a UN refugee agency worker. And she's pictured with her son. She was also killed with her son. So this is the kind of barbarity that is being now extended to the people of Lebanon. Obviously, they're fleeing. Leaflets are being dropped. And people are sheltering in schools and whatnot. And Netanyahu's making the same chilling ass remarks that we've heard elsewhere about Hamas. He's just doing search and replace Hamas with Hezbollah.
I have a message for the people of Lebanon. Israel's war is not with you. It's with Hezbollah. For too long, Hezbollah has been using you as human shields. It placed rockets in your living rooms and missiles in your garage. Those rockets and missiles are aimed directly at our cities, directly at our citizens. To defend our people against Hezbollah strikes, we must take out those weapons. Now, starting this morning, the IDF has warned you to get out of harm's way. I urge you, take this warning seriously. Don't let Hezbollah endanger your lives and the lives of your loved ones. Don't let Hezbollah endanger Lebanon. Please, get out of harm's way now. Once our operation is finished, you can come back safely to your homes.
Sure. Yeah, no, I definitely believe him. I don't know about you, Josh, but I think probably the scariest thing this Halloween you could dress up as and ring someone's doorbell as is Bibi Netanyahu, and imagining opening the door to someone who's going, you're being used as a human shield and this house has a missile in it. I'd be like, oh my God, fuck. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, this is the harbinger of death. He is so terrifying. And this is the exact same thing they were telling the Palestinians in Gaza about Hamas, except for obviously a much smaller area. But it is truly just like, it's just disgusting. And of course, we knew this was going to happen because the Biden administration truly hasn't pushed back at all, although they're working around the clock. They really are.
That, I mean, that is a little bit of a galling statement, the working around the clock, right? And it gets brought out a lot. And it's like, it's just, no, you're not. You know what I mean? Or it's like, excuse me, Vice President Harris said that at the DNC, right? During her nomination acceptance speech. It's like, no, well, no, you're not. You're here. You're not working around the clock. Like it's and not to use that as a distraction, but I just feel like the way that the Israeli government and the US government, to give them cover, are like pretty flippant and pretty glib with what's really happening in the lives that are being lost, even as, I mean, it's an enormously like funding and providing weapons for this military action is enormously unpopular, not to mention the it's politically unpopular and morally abhorrent.
Yes, in all ways, like strategically, politically, morally. Who is benefiting? And again, even Israelis themselves know that this is a massive distraction, that there is, I mean, like imagine if your family member were a hostage, like, you know, your faith in that you'd ever see them alive again must be just completely destroyed at this point. I mean, and yet, you know, this is what they're saying. And the question is like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck are they gonna do? Are they, you know, a lot of outlets are reporting like there might be ground troops, right? I mean, you hear, so that was Netanyahu. Here's the education minister on Israeli TV, and I'm gonna just translate live as I bring it up.
אז אני אומר את זה לצרפתים ולאחרים.
So I say to this, the French and others from and to others from the countries of the world
מה שנקרא ממדינות העולם שטוענות את זה.
Claim that there's no difference between Hezbollah and Lebanon. The way things are progressing at the moment, Lebanon will be annihilated. And I say that even now in a very blunt way. We're in the type of event where Lebanon is going forward, and it will not be the same Lebanon as they know. I'm not going to deal with Hamas or Hezbollah rockets. The price of aggression from Lebanon's territory will be paid by the state of Lebanon. Okay, so they're claiming they're just going after weapons. They're also doing the thing where they're like, well, we want our residents in the north of Israel to be able to return, because there have been rockets that Hezbollah has fired. I think there have been injuries, but even in the last like few days, there have been hundreds of rockets fired, and it's been like a couple injuries, which is bad. No one's defending that. But 500 and I think 50 now have been killed by Israel and more.
And
so
this was the Minister of Education. That's wild to me that's how, like, that's not even your job to talk like that, dude. Like that's the stuff you're saying is so scary. And it's like, shouldn't you be worried about like algebra?
Right, exactly. Well, he's like, no, I'm mostly in the business of destroying others' education, targeting schools.
It's really scary and really, really sad. And like you said, I think almost no one, I'm certainly not cheering on injured civilians in Israel either. And I know people for whom the cause of returning the Israeli hostages is really dear to their hearts. And it is something like, I don't want people to suffer. I don't want them to suffer. I want them to be safe and okay too. But like, this can't be the answer, right? The answer to like this horrible situation and this terrifying situation and you said, the families of the hostages are going, well, this isn't helping. This is not you see the protests that against Netanyahu.
Yep.
Come on, man. Eyes on the prize. I thought we were focused on like bringing civilians back safe, not wreaking destruction in numerous.
Now we're going after Hezbollah, right?
Population.
Exactly. Hezbollah does not have the hostages.
No.
Can we repeat that 1,000,000 times over? But really interestingly, the host of this show pushes back on the minister because he used the word annihilation. And obviously, for Jews around the world, that word is triggering because of the attempted extermination of their people in many, many pogroms, Holocaust, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So listen to what he says. So he goes, excuse me, Mr. Kurt.
סליחה, השר קיש, אתה השתמשת
You used the
במילה,
word,
אמרת,
you asked me
ביקשת
not to
שאני לא אקטע
interrupt
אותך.
you.
תושמד.
Annihilated. The term
השמדה יש לה
annihilation in Hebrew
במינוח
has a
העברי,
connotation.
אתה יודע,
You know, the
שר
defense
הביטחון
minister
אמר,
said
תחזור
Lebanon
לימי
will be
האבן.
back to the
אתה יודע
Stone
מה,
Age.
מתקן
He says,
את
you know
דבריי,
what?
לא
I'm correcting
תושמד.
myself. It will
לבנון
not be
כמו שאנחנו
annihilated,
מכירים
but
אותה,
Lebanon, as
לא
we know,
תהיה
will not
קיימת.
exist.
לבנון
Lebanon will
תשלם
pay
את
the heavy
המחיר
price
הכבד
because of
בגלל
Hezbollah.
חיזבאללה. ואני
And
מתקן
I'm
את דבריי,
correcting
לא
myself.
תושמד,
It
אבל
won't be
אני מדייק.
annihilated. I'll be
כדי
more precise. So I love he's like, oh shit. You're right. Yeah. No. I can't use that. I can't say annihilated. And also it kind of makes us look like the baddies and like we don't want to draw any correlation between what we're doing and what was done to us in the Holocaust. Like, so yeah. No, not an annihilation, just unrecognizable.
Yeah.
I don't know what's scarier.
It really, like, they're really going to the media and saying like real terrifying stuff that again has nothing to do. It's so far beyond, the people who go, well, Israel has to have a right to defend itself. And that's not even what their own government is saying on TV. They're going like, but we have to erase a nation from the map. And it's
right.
like,
And yet
it's really terrifying.
Yeah, and Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, Lloyd Austin, what's his name? Yeah, Joe Biden, and sadly Kamala Harris, all are continuing, and the media is all continuing to gaslight us as if these are honest brokers, honest partners for any kind of, forget peace, ceasefire deal.
Mm-hmm.
They're absolutely not. They have time and time again, they have imploded the ceasefire deal by provoking whoever they're, negotiating with even more with these kinds of things. And this is obviously on top of the targeted assassinations of Hezbollah leader in Iran, and then the targeted assassinations in Beirut a couple months ago. So on and on and on. But there is, and just before we leave the U.S.'s role, this is according to Drop Site News. The Pentagon announced Monday that the U.S. is deploying an unspecified number of American troops in addition to the 40,000 already in the region, in the readout of a call with Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who, BT dubs, still has that arrest warrant out for him by the ICJ. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin reiterated the U.S.'s standard posture that Israel is acting in self-defense. Quote, the secretary expressed his support for Israel's right to defend itself as Hezbollah extends its attacks deeper into Israel, and stressed the importance of finding a path to a diplomatic solution that will allow residents on both sides of the border to return to their homes as quickly and safely as possible. Like, cool. In your head and your head alone, buddy. Like, whatever you guys are fucking smoking, like, pass it along, because you have to be so out of your goddamn mind to believe what you're saying at this point. We know that's not true. Nothing has stopped them at this point. They are armed to the teeth. This is completely like apples to oranges with the idea that Hezbollah has anywhere near the military capacity that Israel does. Like Hezbollah, I mean, Israel was the one who did very terroristic-like activity by fucking exploding people's pagers, solar panels, walkie-talkies. Like, it's just, it's too much, Josh. I'm like, oh, they're starting a war before the election, maybe to get Trump elected. Who fucking knows?
I mean, it's really tough too, because I think there are, like, when you, not to circle back again, but when you watch something like Vice President Harris's nomination acceptance speech, or you hear her speak publicly, and she says things like, we know American military in war zones across the world, and you go, that's actually, it's like a really wonderful goal to not participate in war, right? To truly seek peace, and to not put Americans at risk, never mind to not use Americans to put people of other nations in danger,
Right.
And so you hear stuff like that and you go, well, that's so promising. But
Yeah.
then you see this kind of action and it undercuts it right away, to go, we're going to send, not only as other nations around the world, Germany has stopped sending weapons to Israel as aid.
That's
And
huge.
now we're ramping up, and it's like, again, I keep saying sad and I keep saying scary because I don't have like a lot of funny stuff to say about it, other than it's like it's a fucking horror.
It's a horror. It's a horror. And you're like, who's gonna put the brakes on? Like, can someone pump the brakes?
And again, this is not making anyone safer. This is not a preemptive measure. This is not a prophylactic measure. This is like, it's war. And like, just because
Yeah.
you call it something else, you know what I mean? It doesn't make it different.
De-escalation to in the form of escalation is, I think, what they're calling it.
Yeah,
And you're like,
that was the Blinken thing, right? And it's like, that's not, I think it's like flabbergasting to me that people who are old enough, as I think you and I know I am, I don't want to speak for others,
oh
but I
yeah,
think
no,
you and
I'm
I are
old.
old enough to remember the Iraq War and the lead
Yep.
up to it, and the idea that like peace will only be achieved through overwhelming preemptive force. And
Yep.
it's like, well, that's not how it works. That can only work if you claim a monopoly on force, right? If you're like,
Yeah.
I get to hit you and then you don't get to hit me. That's the only, or I'm going to hit you so hard that there's nothing left to fight back. And it's like,
It's the ultimate
never been
Karen.
right.
Yeah, and it's also like, I feel like now we have like the Karen language to talk about it. It's just like the ultimate like global Karen move to be like, I'm gonna punch the shit out of you. I'm like, gonna call the cops on you.
Well,
And then when you get mad, I'm gonna cry.
I think it's even beyond. I think that's
Yeah.
besmirching I don't want to say good name of Karens, but the name of Karens in general, because I think, they've gone in this situation, if we're going to extend this metaphor, to the manager, the UN and the International Criminal Court, right? And that's and the manager has said, no, I'm not on your side.
Yep.
And so like, it is, when you've got to go beyond the man, that's like going like, hey, there's I didn't get the Parmesan cheese on my pasta, so I'd like a free meal. And the manager says no. And you go, fine, well, I'm going to execute someone at every other table. And I blame that on the manager for not giving me Parmesan cheese.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to call in a bomb threat to this Olive Garden. I just want to remember there is still reason to smile sometimes in all of this. And that is when someone attempts to just say the most basic ass line of arguably propaganda, but just the standard ass line that every politician's been echoing since the beginning of this genocide, this war, this conflict, which is bring the hostages home. Here is Keir Starmer, the new prime minister of the UK, who is at a labor conference that started, I guess, today or this week. Here he is attempting that very, very simple line.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Oh, one more time. Wait, one more time.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
The sausages, all the hostages, whichever happens to materialize first. At this point, I think it's going to be sausages. Get your sausages, bring them back. Like, this is
Hebrew National is like, leave us out of this. This is not, we don't want to be involved. But yeah, and it is.
Yeah, the Hebrew National is like, we're anti-Zionist, bro. Might be in the name, but
we don't want, like, the sausages. Leave the sausages. This isn't about the sausages. They're all beef. We understand this. But truly, like, that's like, I don't know. It's so, because that's the thing. Like, people, that is such a reasonable aim, and it is being so thoroughly thwarted by this aggressive military campaign that is taking so many lives.
It's not the aim. And that's like, this is the point. We're almost at a year. And the answer is, to me, anyone who echoes that line without being honest about how unserious Israel is about actually saving people's lives is lying. It's never been the goal. It hasn't been the goal. They have killed more hostages than they've rescued. They're completely bad faith when it comes to negotiating a ceasefire. They don't give a fuck. So why do we have to treat them like they do?
And the most hostages that were returned, right, were returned during that temporary ceasefire. So we know that the diplomacy is more effective than the militarism. And it's, I think that's just like, it's something that's so important, again, that on a moral grounds, but also political and practical grounds to do that. And it's like, maybe that's what Netanyahu's actually trying to do. Maybe his whole thing is like, actually, we just want the sausages back. This isn't about the hostages anymore. Keir Starmer just said what I said on a private call. It's all about the sausages.
It's just about the sausages. Bring them home. Bring the poor sausages home. All right, we got to turn. Oh boy. This is some news that is obviously maybe a little more pop culture, but I think is very important to talk about, which is Sean Combs. Sean Combs, hip hop mogul, has been arrested. He was arrested in New York. He's being held in a Manhattan jail. He was arrested on racketeering and sex trafficking charges. He faces life in prison. He knew he was going to be arrested in New York. He was sunbathing in Central Park the morning that he was arrested, which kind of makes sense since like it's not clear if he'll ever see the outside of a prison cell. He's been denied bail twice now. One of them was, I think, he offered $50 million. A couple homes were thrown in there, and they were like, "Ew, no, your homes where these disgusting acts to happen? No thanks." So there's a lot obviously to unpack, but and I'm curious, Josh, if your thoughts on it, but a little bit more specific about it. Obviously, these are racketeering charges, but he's being prosecuted first. Members, they have not been named, I believe. The members and associates of the Combs enterprise, again, remember the Trump enterprise, same thing, engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other activities, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for the purpose of prostitution, coercion and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotics offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice, the indictment states. Multiple witnesses who've worked for Combs have been meeting with prosecutors. A source familiar with the federal investigation told CNN at least one male sex worker is expected to testify in front of the grand jury in the coming days, according to the source, who added that the witnesses' allegations go beyond the details in this week's indictment. Jesus Christ. It's like, oh, there's more than just arson. And another thing to note about this, some of the people who were victimized by Combs were also co-conspirators. So the Combs indictment indicates that specifically, stating a purpose of the criminal enterprise was, quote, securing absolute loyalty from members of the Combs enterprise, including through acts of violence and threats. In other words, I'm going to like rope you into my criminality and then hold it against you so you can never leave. And this is, again, associates, people he was mentoring, people who he was representing as a producer, who he had signed to his label, Bad Boy. And it all comes after, over the summer, a lawsuit was settled between him and his ex, Cassie, who's an R&B singer, that alleged physical and sexual violence. There's an undisclosed sum of money where, the lawsuit was settled. We don't know. But another lawsuit has just popped up from a singer, Dawn Richards, who was in that band Danity Kane from his Making the Band show, right? Who said that he groped her and assaulted her, and that she herself witnessed him abusing Cassie as well as one of his other ex-wives, I believe Kim Reynolds, is that her name? It's fucking bad, y'all. But I will say, this is, some folks have pointed out, one of the reasons we haven't heard a lot about this is because many of the victims are men. However, it seems like the reason we are hearing about it is because a lot of those who've testified, especially people like Cassie or again the singer Dawn Richard, are women, and they've been the ones to sort of lead the charge. I guess I just wanted to like. There's a lot here, but there's two things I wanted to draw everyone's attention to before whatever, because I did a deep dive into this a little bit, and a couple of gross things. So I didn't know that Usher, for example, was one of Diddy's proteges, and that Usher was actually just 14 years old when he went to go live with Puff Daddy in New York. And here is a bit of an interview that Usher did with Howard Stern. And he's like, I don't know, Josh, pick up on whatever you think this means. It's kind of terrifying.
New York City. And I lived with Sean Puffy Combs for a year.
That's the crazy thing. Now, that was L.A. Reid's idea, right? We're sending you over to something called Puffy Flavor Camp.
There you go.
To learn some...
Flavor Camp?
Yeah,
Flavor
that's
Camp.
what it was called. And you're going to go to Puff Daddy's. He's going
In the 90s. Do you understand what that's like?
Puffy's place was like just filled with chicks and orgying like nonstop, right?
No, not really. I mean, but hey, it was curious. I got a chance to see some things.
Yeah, but you were 13. What were you seeing?
I went there to see the lifestyle.
Right.
And I saw it. And it was, but I don't know if I could indulge and understand what I was even looking at. It was.
Okay, I was curious. I saw some things, but I don't know if I could indulge. I didn't know what I was looking at. Jesus Christ. He sounds like a fucking, like a child that just saw someone like swallow a sword and it came out as like their butt at a circus. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of, this is like, I'm sorry, but this sounds like someone's describing something a little traumatic.
Well, especially because they went, well, it was orgies. And he's like, no, not orgies. Something different that I don't understand. And it's like, that's like a pretty terrifying description of what was going on.
There's a little bit more, and I apologize for the sync here.
It was pretty wild.
So nobody tried to, some woman didn't come along.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I didn't say that. What I did say is that there were very curious things taking place, and I didn't necessarily understand it.
Biggie.
So a woman didn't try to, and he's like, I didn't say that. So what does that mean? Like, I didn't say that I didn't participate or no one accosted me. And she does say woman, but who knows, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Smalls was there.
Biggie Smalls was there. Lil' Kim, Craig Mack.
All these people are hanging around.
Yeah, man. Faith Evans,
And your parents
Jodeci,
were
Mary
okay?
J. Blige.
14 years old. You're a dad now. Would you ever send your kid to Puffy Camp?
Hell no.
All right. So there you have it. Hell no. I would never send my kid to Puffy Camp. Josh, just maybe your reactions to this, like, insane, like decades long trail of crimes.
Yeah, I mean, it just whenever you hear about a story like this, it's not just the apparatus of like one bad person doing horrible things, right? It's like what it takes to keep that going and to keep it secret from the general public. And I think that's like the stuff that scares me too, is like how much is that, like, it's not just, like, oh, this guy is a creep. It's like, oh, he had like a corporation of like
Creepdom.
People were getting 1099s or whatever to like allow a creep empire to exist, allegedly.
Yeah, and these things were like these little parties, which I don't feel like you can call them parties. Just because there's alcohol and drugs doesn't mean anyone's having fucking fun.
Right,
but,
we've seen Leaving Las Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. They were called freak-offs, which is really funny because I've seen other media outlets report them as a freak-outs. They were called freak-outs. And you're just like, oh, God, just get it right. Just get the name of this weird-ass shit right. Again, there were like sex workers, but also people who he was shepherding and stewarding like Usher, but also like Justin Bieber. There is now, video footage is being looked at in a new light of like a young Justin Bieber with Sean Combs, who's obviously like in his 40s. And it's just like, what the fuck? Why is this shit happening in front of us? It's like Michael Jackson being like, no, my best friend is a 3-year-old. And you're like, no, like my best friend is an 8-year-old. Not okay. But yeah, this is why like I think it's important to talk about this, because it it's just like, I don't know. And especially I think when it happens in like the rap hip hop community or like with R. Kelly and stuff, like part of what I learned as a white ally or a half white ally from the R. Kelly doc was like, this is all like people ignore it because it was happening to like young Black women, you know? And that's why he could get away with it for so long. And so it's like, it's important when this shit breaks through. Also, we're looking at another Epstein here. I mean, the guy had everyone in his orbit. And one of the people he didn't have in his orbit was Kamala Harris. But don't tell Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is very hell-bent on trying to link Vice President Kamala Harris and Sean Combs. Take a look.
AI and disinformation are rearing their ugly heads yet again in the presidential race. Former President Trump reposting on Truth Social an altered photo trying to tie Vice President Harris to Sean Diddy Combs. On the left, you see the real image. It shows Harris with Montel Williams. On the right, the altered image, which has Sean Combs' face over Williams. The meme Trump reposted also had several lines of lewd and inappropriate text that we are not airing.
So that is a terrible Photoshop job. And initially, I couldn't tell who was Photoshop because I only looked at Kamala. But then I was like, oh no, it was Montel Jordan.
Montel Williams, right?
What, Montel Williams, not Montel Jordan. Montel Williams, which, by the way, I also see Kim Reynolds. No, Kim Reynolds is the governor of Iowa, Francesca. Paige told me that. No, so wrong person. Although that would have been really funny if Kim Reynolds was somehow wrapped up with P. Diddy. But the person who was wrapped up with P. Diddy was Donald fucking Trump, you guys. Here's just a smattering of very 90s, early 2000s dated photos. There you have Russell Simmons, another accused like serial rapist, basically. Melania's in two of these photos. It's just like, oh yeah, no, they were friends. They've been friends. It is very easy to find photos of Donald Trump with Sean Combs, just like you can find photos of him with Jeffrey Epstein. But Josh, this is all so he can get to the pedophiles. The closer he gets to the groomers, the more he can, if he infiltrates them, he can upend their enterprise.
I get to tell you, he's gotten awfully close to a lot of sex criminals and alleged sex criminals, and not a lot of not a lot of busts being made by Donald Trump. It feels like he's kept his police work. He's like still pretty deep undercover.
It's deep. It's very deep.
Is that still what QAnon thinks? Are they still like, oh yeah, like every time there's a new sex criminal with pictures of Donald Trump, they're like, God, he's so good at this. He's just getting them all. And not like, oh, this old man probably committed a lot of sex crimes.
Yeah. No, he had the foresight because he knew this. He's been building the case. He actually tipped the feds off in the first place. Yeah, sure.
We didn't do
amazing.
That 20 years ago when he was around all those people. Yeah.
Oof. Oh God. Anyway, the man is trash. I hope he does stay alive and is not Jeff Epstein. Because, he should face some justice. And I hope that everything that he owns is all melted down, or not melted down, but, the things that need to be burned with fire, burn them with fire. But, everything else should go to the victims of his insanity. Let's bring in with that, switching it up. I had to do Diddy. We did Diddy. Staff writer at the New Republic, the author of Overheated, How Capitalism Broke the Planet and How We Fight Back, co-author of A Planet to Win, Why We Need the Green New Deal, Kate. This person is also a fellow at the Roosevelt Institute and serves in Dissidents editorial board. Please welcome Kate Aronoff. Kate, what's up?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, thank you for being here. This is Josh.
Hi, Josh.
Hi, Kate. Very nice to meet you.
Great to meet you. I'm a fan.
Hell yeah. I am
likewise.
so
Thank
happy. I love bringing good people together. That's what this show is all about. And I want to talk to you because I think I do want to talk to you about the link between the fossil fuel industry and this ongoing genocide in Gaza, which our girl Greta just hipped us to. But first, I do want to ask you about the Harris-Walz campaign, and specifically when it comes to climate. Honestly, the only thing that I've heard concrete coming out of Kamala's mouth has been, I support fracking. It's something that the media has only focused on. It's something that, supposedly by getting her on a former, anti-fracking stance, we're supposed to learn something about her being a flip-flopper. Never mind the fact that the actual issue is being ignored in and of itself. But just talk to me about like Kamala Harris when it comes to like what you see as inklings of a climate plan, if any exist at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much, like you mentioned. Her website has basically a paragraph listing off her energy/climate platform, which includes investments in clean energy, really sort of boilerplate stuff that you would see on any Democratic candidate's website. And we will keep gas prices low and are proud of the record oil and gas production that has happened under the Biden-Harris administration, all in this one paragraph. And so this isn't unique to climate, right? I mean, across sort of policy issues, Harris really just hasn't said very much. And as you said, this fracking thing has come up mostly as it relates to Pennsylvania. And so, Pennsylvania is a swing state. There's important electoral votes to be had. There is fracking that happens there. But the way that this gets talked about is as if every resident of Pennsylvania owns a small fracking business, including people in Pittsburgh and like South Philly, right? Which is just not the case. And, and there's really sort of mixed polling as to how important this actually is to the people of Pennsylvania, right? And you have these hyper concentrations of voters in Pittsburgh and Philly, right? The two biggest cities in the state. I don't quote me on the demographics of Pennsylvania, but a lot of people in that state live in Philly and Pennsylvania and are not, dyed in the wool sort of fans of fracking and the industry, in part because, it pollutes the air and water and does a lot of things that people don't like, and the profits don't go to the people who live there, right? Do not go to like the residents of Harrisburg suburbs, right? And so, I mean, Harris, 4 years ago, when she was running for president, had a platform where she said a lot of things that climate activists like. She talked about the Green New Deal. She voted for the Green New Deal when she was in Congress.
Is she a co-sponsor? I'm reading here, an early co-sponsor of the Green New Deal.
Yeah, along with a lot of other people. I think you can look at Harris's record. You can look at what she said. I just don't think she has thought very much at all about climate. And so I think what we can probably expect is some continuation of what Biden has done. And that's really what, to the extent that she's talked about it, which is just not very much. Yeah, she's on the Biden record, which is a real mixed bag of stuff. Includes the sort of positive parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, which are historic investments. Also, as she has bragged about, record oil and gas production with no sort of indication that there will be limits placed on that anytime soon. But she just hasn't really said very much about it at all.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that a little bit more. I mean, I do think it's important to know, like, it does feel like her fracking stance with nothing else there. Like, instead of reframing that question to be like, thank you for that question, I think we really need to focus on, like, you can even talk about like climate preparedness, right? Or protecting frontline communities. I don't know, some stuff like that that really isn't all that radical. It's not Green New Deal-y, but instead she just almost takes that question as, I mean, it is meant as a gotcha. She takes it as a gotcha. She doubles down on fracking and they move on. There's no like, I'm going to take this as an opportunity to really talk about climate change. So that's disappointing. And to make it, and this I think you talk about a lot, which is, and for the people you've interviewed and make it not a partisan issue. Like, make it a human issue, because it is. And so many people in red states and rural voters and voters who are Republican are like pro renewables, because it would truly help out their, like whatever, their communities. And yet, because it's politically toxic, they stay away from it. So it's like, can we ever just fucking depoliticize this issue?
Yeah, and I am just, I don't know, I should stop being surprised at some point, but am consistently just like
I think it's great that you've maintained your sense of openness and wonder,
my
Kate.
sense of wonder to the world. Just constantly taking the world as it comes.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wild that, they have not figured out a better way to talk about climate in the course of 40 years of this being a really sort of massive issue. And, it's gotten better in like fits and starts with the Inflation Reduction Act. Democrats talk about jobs being a thing that climate action can produce, right? But like you said, there's all this just really common sense pocketbook stuff that they won't talk about, right? Like the fact that in Florida, homeowners are paying 5 times the national average for insurance, right? It is just really expensive to live in Florida because of climate change. You can hit Republicans over the head with that, right? Ron DeSantis obviously ignoring it. Even in swing states, right? Places in Indiana, not a swing state, but places in the Midwest are facing really sort of outrageous amounts of flood insurance, raising like really heightened rates of flood insurance for these sort of global factors, and because their politicians aren't doing anything about it, right? Republicans have just looked the other way on this issue because their voters are Republicans and are, really sort of concentrated among a lot of very wealthy people who will pay whatever it costs to live on the Miami coast. And that's, not speaking to people in Michigan who are paying, outrageous amounts of money to live in pretty working class suburbs, or in, even other parts of Florida or Georgia or wherever. Everywhere is sort of dealing with this. And insurance is one example of that, but there's so many ways in which climate is not this like thing that's coming down the pike.
Yeah.
No one accuses the insurance companies, or at least I haven't heard it, they're not like, oh, buying into the hoax. They're like, no, our actuaries said it doesn't make sense for us to insure you because your houses are going to be, they're going to be like the little castles at the bottom of a fishbowl in 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, California, like the whole state of California, State Farm is pulled out because it costs so much to pay out for flood damages or for fire damages.
The liberal media being afraid of fire, those liberal insurance companies.
Exactly. No, and it's super a pocketbook issue, as you're saying, and it could really have an impact. Anyway, I did want to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. You had a recent piece in the New Republic about it, saying, don't believe the recent headlines, the Inflation Reduction Act worked. And it's a great piece, but it's, I want you to unpack it. We know that it, did spur infrastructure and development, right? And new projects. But my question is, like, to what extent have those new projects been like green or sustainable, for lack of a better term? And also, to what extent, like where do you fall on, it was a start, it's good? I know, when I talk to climate reporters, it ranges from like, no, it was incredible, we've never seen like anything like this before, which I guess we haven't, but like, does it mean we are stuck in this incentive only structure to actually have real renewable or green energy, or moving to EVs and whatnot? So where do you stand on that? That's a massive question.
I'll take it bit by bit. I think many things can be true at the same time. So the piece focuses on the fact that the Inflation Reduction Act is working pretty well on its own terms. But what are those terms, right? People talk about the Inflation Reduction Act as being a big climate bill, as being, this huge investment in reducing emissions. It does no such thing, right? The Inflation Reduction Act is a piece of what's called green industrial policy, right? And so it's chosen a couple of different, very strategic, mostly export sectors, things like electric vehicles, production of certain critical minerals, investments in clean energy in the power sector. There's a lot of subsidies, mostly tax breaks and tax incentives for companies and for consumers, right? It's cheaper to buy an EV now. It's cheaper to put a solar panel in your house if you have one. If I, rent like a lot of people, and so it's not an option. But it works on its own terms to encourage investment in these sectors. But there's nothing in that bill, right, that says we have to reduce X amount of emissions by X time. That is just not a metric on which success is judged when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act, right? And so it's doing the thing it set out to do, which was to, make companies want to build EV plants, to make people put solar panels on their house, to encourage utilities to put
heat
more
pump.
solar.
I want a heat pump so bad, but I have to convince my landlord, and she will never fucking do that.
So that's all great, right? And I think this is why it's hard to talk about the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, it's hard to talk about the Irish Republican Army
because of the disambiguation, certainly.
Yes. Subject.
It's hard to look up
podcast.
the right IRA that you're intending on Wikipedia.
Yeah. I was in Ireland on the 1-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act and did pass by a sign that said IRA 2023, which was funny only to me, a demographic of one for that joke. But
that's
anyway,
so beautiful that you found a perfect joke for you just waiting out there in the wild. And if you hadn't seen it, that would have been for nobody.
It's incredible. I really
hope that was a tweet, at least.
I think I tried and really didn't do a very good job. But sometimes the universe just blesses you with little gifts. Right. But yes, anyway, so the Inflation Reduction Act, which I'll keep saying to avoid confusion, does a lot of very good things, but there's also just so much more that needs to be done, right? The administration has put out pretty weak regulatory standards through the Environmental Protection Agency, through the Department of Interior, some of which are fine, but a lot of which are getting struck down in the courts. And Biden has not been especially active at proposing radical reforms to the Supreme Court that would be needed to actually get the sorts of changes that we need to reduce emissions at scale.
What have they been? Do you remember off the top what they've been blocking?
The EPA regs are a big one, so power plant regulations, and there are
heaven forbid, that we could regulate the toxins in our air.
You gotta let those power plants innovate. You gotta pull away the restrictions and let them cook.
They will.
Too long. Our power plants.
There's
hemmed in.
They're gonna cook regardless.
Cook the whole.
Well, there's also a really interesting overlap, and I think you've written about this in I think documented the way the right reacts to it, which is not actually unlike what Josh is saying, which is all these climate policies are woke, and exactly I'm trying to think of maybe a black lung joke, but that doesn't really work. But you know what I'm saying? They're basically Biden's coming for your gas stoves. Remember that? Even though we now know how awful they are for you. And I'm oh my God, I've got a small child. I need to get this shit out of here. But it's everything is being pitched as this culture war. Even these very small reforms, or not even, no one's coming for anything. They're just incentivizing you to replace that gas stove.
And that's
so communism.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that level of stuff is so disorienting as a climate reporter, because the big target of this climate is woke stuff has been BlackRock, right? Which invest billions of dollars in fossil fuels, which has shown no signs. Like the CEO, Larry Fink, has said almost exactly the opposite. We love fossil fuels. They make us money. They attract customers. We're going to keep doing it. And then you have this whole wild conversation in Congress and state legislatures saying BlackRock is woke. They're discriminating against fossil fuel companies. And so it makes it just really hard to plant your feet anywhere in terms of what's actually being said. But that is the Republican line of attack on this stuff, is that anything, that where the word climate comes up is woke and evil.
Even though so many red states have benefited from the Inflation Reduction Act. And this is my question to you, if heaven forbid, obviously Trump is elected, there's all these plans and hopes to overturn the Inflation Reduction Act. And you talked a little bit about how difficult that would be. But then also, I know we all know one of the things that he also wants to do that was in the Inflation Reduction Act is rescind the ability for Medicare to negotiate drug prices. That was something that was, put in there. And so they're trying to, even though, they say they're not, and they're going after big pharma, but no, Medicare should not be able to negotiate the price of insulin for seniors or whatnot. But yeah, thoughts on like, what the right is going to try and do, or is it just like, it's all fucking bluster and they'll just let it ride?
Yeah, I mean, the whole reason the Inflation Reduction Act is structured the way that it is as a series of incentives is, I mean, for one, just the math of the Senate at the time, which was that you could not, convince a filibuster-proof majority to vote for this thing with so many Republicans in. But the reason it's incentives is because those are really hard to kill as opposed to executive actions, as opposed to regulatory changes, right? Those things are a bit more vulnerable are much more vulnerable in court, whereas it's pretty hard to change statute. And bills that spend money on stuff don't tend to get redacted, right? Things that like give money to people, which is all the Inflation Reduction Act does essentially, are just more durable because those kinds of things don't tend to get attacked in the way that, Republicans are threatening, and because they put, real money into a lot of places. And in the case of the Inflation Reduction Act, most of the investment, I'm forgetting the exact figure, but the majority of that investment has gone toward red states, which are building, solar farms or building EV factories. Whether that means that Republicans won't go after it, I don't know, right? It's like normally,
I mean,
right?
It feels like they attack Medicaid expansion, right? Even when it benefits the people who live in their states, and it's like a political rallying thing, even rallying cry, even as it hurts the people that they represent.
Dude, 10 years later, they still haven't expanded Medicaid. Like, I think it's like between 10 and 14 states. Still, 10 years fucking later. Man, not 10 years later, way more than 10 to 15 years later, after the passage of, the ACA. Jesus Christ.
I can talk mostly about climate because that's what I report about. But like, you see this time and time again with the Republicans where they focus on these like, quote unquote cultural issues, which have material bases and real effects, obviously, but are, serve as distractions from the fact that Republicans are making your life worse by making it harder to be poor or middle class or just not a millionaire. And so when they call BlackRock woke and they say, ESG, investment criteria are the devil, that is to say that like we're going to take money from you in very real ways, including by maybe closing the solar factory that your son works at, right? And they have done this, it's not just climate again, but like on issue after issue after issue, it's still like focus on this like really sort of polarizing thing that gets a lot of headlines and whatever to distract from the fact that they're, making your life worse.
Yeah.
And even it feels like their basic position is like the idea that there is a climate is itself quote unquote woke, right? Like it's like, what's climate but a union of weather? We can't be having that. We got to have the right to be as hot as you want any individual day.
Yeah. Before we move on, I think the one thing I'll say about the right and climate change is that they actually are much more honest, I think, than some centrist Democrats are when it comes to, they're like, what they're talking about is socialism. And you're like, we kind of are. I mean, whatever you want to call it. But, as your book explains, the system of capitalism is unsustainable with a finite world, with the natural world, if we're trying to coexist with it and live in it. Like, there's only so much you can, it's just completely incompatible. And so, you do need systemic change. And so in that way, it's like, no, a Green New Deal is what you need. You are being honest when you say you actually have the economy, and changing the economy is integral to saving us from climate chaos. And so I've appreciated that. And the other thing, last thing I'll say is they're also hella cynical about it because, and I say this a million times over, but under Donald Trump, the transportation secretary released like their whole like transportation report, blah, blah, blah. And they got rid of emission standards because, in their words, it was already a done deal. Climate change is already here. There's nothing we can do to stop it. That's literally what it said in their report. And they were like, that's why we're getting rid of them. So bye. I hope we get to Mars in time.
And that's why we need to use AI created oxygen. We got to make oxygen with AI. Bing, bang, boom.
Oh God, except it would, you know how much like it would, anyway. It
You'd
would
be like,
use
"Oh, no,
oxygen
that's-
to
yeah,
then
that's
create
uranium."
and use the
But if you
fresh
capture
water.
the carbon dioxide that the data center uses
right.
to power itself, and then you create the easy.
Power your AI girlfriend. But yeah, so that was the only thing. But I do want to move on because you got to go soon. But Greta Thunberg, our queen, our Lord and Savior, obviously you love her. One loves her because she cannot be co-opted, and case in point, she is standing up for one of the increasingly more popular issues of our time, which is the ongoing genocide in Gaza. She's making the link directly between what is happening in Gaza and, yes, the fossil fuel industry. Take a look at what she's calling for.
In Palestine and all over the world, the fight against colonialism and corporations' destruction of the planet are intrinsically linked. Look at Chevron. Everyone knows that Chevron is one of the world's biggest climate criminals. But the oil giant is also fueling Israel's genocide in Palestine. As Israel bombs hospitals, homes, and schools in Gaza, Chevron supplies them with energy from 2 Israeli-claimed gas fields in the Mediterranean, making millions in the process. Ending Israel's genocide in Gaza and Israeli apartheid is a climate justice issue. Israel is destroying Palestinian lives, but also destroying Palestinian lands and resources through its warfare and industries that pollute and destroy the environment. We cannot stand by and do nothing. I'm joining Palestinian global calls to boycott Chevron. Together we are calling for Chevron to withdraw from its projects with Israel. Join the movement to defend human rights and protect the planet by pledging to boycott Chevron now.
Oh, when the BDS movement and the climate justice movement collide, I just want to cry tears of joy. I know, Kate, you've written a bit about this, but the climate impact of this war, this genocide, and also what she's saying, these profiteers.
Yeah, I mean, for one, just the military, the emissions produced by the war in Gaza. I did not look up the study beforehand, but can pass it on insofar as folks are interested. Is enormous. I mean, and war in general is very carbon intensive, and making weapons is very carbon intensive. But the Gaza war in particular has been just a massive sort of burst of carbon into the atmosphere. And then
I think you said that it emitted more carbon than the countries of Colombia and Qatar, when Qatar is like a natural gas producing state. So that's wild, and that's from your reporting.
Yeah. Yes. From I quoted the study.
Oh, from the whatever.
People much smarter than me came up with those figures. But yeah. So the carbon emissions of the war itself are just enormous. And then what Greta is talking about there is the fact that Chevron has major interests in Israeli gas, which over the last decade or so, Israel has positioned itself as a major exporter of gas in the Mediterranean, and has spent much of the last decade attempting to build up these reserves with Chevron's help. Chevron is one of the major developers of these pretty sizable gas fields in the Eastern Mediterranean, and is, as she states there, fueling Israel's war machine with revenue from the gas that they sell. And there are only signs that they want to keep developing those fields, to keep building infrastructure there. And one of the, I think more sort of tragic things about all this is that there are, very small gas fields off the coast of Gaza. Gaza Marine is the name of the field. And, I am not going to say that I support additional oil and gas extraction or any of that, but Israel has kept for decades Palestine from developing those reserves and having the revenue that might come from those fields while they continue to make just millions and millions of dollars off of the reserves in their own, less contested borders and seas. So, and Chevron, obviously no corporation has like an objection to making money if there is a conflict going on, insofar as they can keep doing it. And yeah, it's really great to see. I mean, it's just been really great to see. Like, it's I think a kind of lonely space in climate world to be outspoken about Gaza and about Palestine. And so I think having Greta be out there is saying this is really important.
Yeah, Libs, which side are you on? Let's go. How you feel now about your girl?
This is a bit of an aside, but a German magazine wrote one of the craziest things I've ever seen. That was like
I can't imagine.
Not a German magazine.
A German magazine. A 10,000 word story co-authored by like 6 people that quoted like a random Holocaust survivor asking about.
Was it a takedown of Greta?
Yes.
Jesus.
It was a cover of this like pretty well circulated German magazine. I'm forgetting the name of it, but like because she spoke out about Palestine.
Jesus Christ, because she had a stuffed animal octopus on her shoulder in that photo where she was posing for in solidarity with Palestinians. It's wild. I mean, lastly, before you go, there's also other profiteers other than Chevron from, the genocide. And you have a piece about ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, investments that are basically like, yeah, we're environmentally, socially responsible. We're Raytheon supplying like the weapons and the missiles to Israel, like, via the United States. Like, just can you explain? Like, ESG is kind of like bullshit at this point, but now there's straight up weapons manufacturers and war profiteers hidden in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most cynical take on this is that ESG has sort of always been bullshit in a certain in a certain way. Environmental, social, and governance factors, which are just things that companies consider when they're making investments, mostly is sort of risk mitigation to just make ordinary business decisions about what will make them money and what won't.
Right.
And what we've seen mostly since Russia invaded Ukraine, and this has been led by European governments for the most part, and obviously there are friendly audiences for this in the US too, to say that weapons manufacturers, because they are making the weapons that are defending Ukraine, are ESG, are important.
Oh my God.
For protecting the social order.
Oh my God, that is cynical. I mean, that is
so
that's
and now and so now you have Raytheon and Boeing and any number of other companies being included in these like ESG funds that people are investing in and are being marketed as like green and progressive.
Oh my God, that's so painful. What's funny about this though is like it reminds me of the Biden line of like, well, no, we're selling defensive weapons to Israel, not offensive ones. And you're like, who's making that distinction? Like you, and also like the religion and race of the person dropping the bomb. But like, it's just so ridiculous to me. This is so ostensibly they could argue that we are helping Israel defend itself, which is the morally right side of this war. Ergo, this is an environmental and social,
so
investment.
Therefore, missiles are recycling. That's the same.
Yeah, exactly. This missile is made from recycled material. Jesus.
Yeah, don't reduce, but definitely reuse, I guess.
My God, this is wild. That is wild. Well, thank you so much, Kate, for coming on. You're so smart. I don't say that, but you are. And thank you for doing all this reporting. And everybody, please get Kate's book, Overheated, How Capitalism Broke the Planet and How We Fight Back. It's that how we fight back part that I think is really important and that we need to remember all the time. But also it's just important for people who are maybe like on the fence about, problematizing capitalism, and climate is such a way into really understanding why we need much more than fix-its or little fix-its.
Thanks
know
so
if I'm
much. This
ending
was so
that.
fun. I mean, fun. I don't know. The stuff we talked
Yeah.
about wasn't fun, but it was nice to see you and
Yes,
to meet
so
Josh
good to
and,
see you. Yeah,
all
hell
of the
yeah.
about things that were not related to the substance of what we were talking about were great. The substance is pretty depressing.
I hope you come back real soon. Thank you all so much. Josh popped off for a little bit, but he's back.
I'm back. Thank you so much
Hell
for
yeah.
having me. Sorry.
Thank you
My
for having me
camera
back.
got a
I
little
wasn't gonna let
funky.
you back.
I shouldn't have. I deserve that.
We have one more segment. Last final little tidbit, although we will see. This has been a week of non-endorsements of the Harris-Walz campaign. So big non-endorsements. What do you mean by non-endorsements, Francesca? Well, a few key players in this country, unions, a pop star, and a movement of uncommitted voters have decided not to endorse Kamala Harris outright. This is endorsement enforcement. Let's start with the most maybe upsetting for the most obvious, which none of these are really all that upsetting, but this one is upsetting, which are the Teamsters. So the Teamsters, obviously the Sean O'Brien, I believe, is the head of the Teamsters, and he was the leader who spoke at the RNC to much the chagrin of his own membership and to a lot of union members and working people who are like, what the hell? Donald Trump and Republicans haven't done shit for the working class, but okay. They just declined to endorse a candidate in this election. They put out a statement that said, our mission as a union representatives is clear: to be honest and upfront, to be inclusive, and above all, transparent with our membership. As the strongest, most democratic labor union in America, it was vital for our members to drive this endorsement process. Democrats, Republicans, and independents proudly call our union home, and we have a duty to represent and respect every one of them. We strongly encourage all our members to vote in the upcoming election and to remain engaged in the political process. But this year, no candidate for president has earned the endorsement of the Teamsters International Union. While 10,000 Teamsters at the United Airlines are currently negotiating a new agreement, tens of thousands of railroad Teamsters were forced to accept a new contract implemented by Congress without member support in 2022. Bring in some receipts. In a roundtable discussions with Trump in January and Harris this month, neither candidate promised to intervene to force similar RLA contracts, which undermines workers' bargaining leverage. So sort of sticking up for the railroad workers here. Harris pledged, if elected, to sign the PRO Act, an essential piece of labor legislation strengthening union protections, and criticized dangerous right-to-work laws that are enacted to bankrupt unions. Trump would not commit to veto national right-to-work legislation if he returned to the White House. I don't know. I understand that both of them might have come down the wrong way on the railroad stuff, but like one of them is just like, I believe in passing the PRO Act, and I don't believe in the right to national right to work laws. And Trump is like, nah, I don't know where I stand on that. I mean, this is the equivalent of like Planned Parenthood being like, some of our members have decided we don't know where we stand, when it comes to Harris or Trump on abortion. So we're just going to non-endorse right now. Like, it's just so egregious. And I've heard from Teamsters just anecdotally that are like, this was not a Democratic vote. This does not represent us. And in fact, a lot of Teamsters have broken off and said that they do endorse Harris.
Yeah, I mean, those grounds are especially specious, right? Like, I understand that there is a critique of Harris and Walz from the left and even from the labor left on certain grounds, but that I will say that I believe strongly in credit where credit's due, and that the Biden administration has been extremely pro-labor in comparison to like most administrations in American history, right? And so I think like, if you're withholding an endorsement, that's one thing, but like it doesn't make sense to play to like act like these people are the same. Donald Trump believes that like after you're done, after someone delivers you something, you should be able to throw them in a wood chipper and sell their wood chipped organ slurry for money. So, and like, that is not the belief of the Biden administration, or presumably a future Harris administration.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, like, there's some good things that Biden has done. Obviously,
Absolutely.
Foreign policy has outshone a lot of it in the last year. But yes, when it comes to the National Labor Relations Board, that is huge, and going after the union busters, and walking the picket line with the UAW, really.
I mean, I think these are like, I don't want to presume what outweighs what to whom, but I do think that these are real issues, and it is not like, well, they both have their flaws on labor domestically, and it's like, no, one of them would replace every working person in America with a robot that he could have sex with, and then the other one has not solved our eroding union density and consumer corporate consolidation on their own. I think it's like this issue specific, or I mean, among others, there is an enormous gulf.
Yes, 100%. On this issue, you're just like, what are you doing, Sean? Yeah. You're the bad Sean.
And I think he gets dinged too because of speaking at the RNC, right? Like if he had this strong policy of being like, I'm to the left of every major party politician on a national level, then you go, oh, I see what critique he's levying. But I think you do get to kind of raise your eyebrows when someone who has spoken at the RNC is taking this kind of stance.
Yeah, and so I did stand up for the United Electrical Workers Union. I don't know. I forgot what it was. I was trying to pronounce it.
Both the acronym and what it sounds like when you put your fingers in an electrical socket.
Exactly. I think I attempted to make that joke. It was really, really fun. So the people who hired me for the show, the leaders were like, this was 2017. They go, we've got some Trumpers in the audience, but give them hell. They were very resolute. Yeah, there's some membership that voted for Trump, but they're going to like you, and you should just do your thing and don't worry about it. And also they're dumbasses. And it's because they are, looking out for the broader good of the union. They're not just sort of we've got some people who, believe in whatever. They believe in things that will literally undermine our very ability to exist. But and instead of calling, anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's move on. So the next non-endorsement we have comes from the Uncommitted movement. Remember, in a lot of states in the primary, instead of Joe Biden, there was a slot of voting uncommitted. And hundreds of thousands of people in states across this country did vote uncommitted in the primary, Democratic primary. And it was a way to leverage the anger and righteous anger around Biden's handling of Gaza. However, that was when he was running for president. Biden drops out. There is a lot of excitement around Kamala Harris from many different sectors. The Uncommitted movement is still and has been calling for a weapons embargo. They did call and ask for a speaker at the DNC, which they did not receive. They also asked for a meeting with Kamala Harris. They did not get that meeting. So they, this last week, decided to not endorse a candidate for president. Here's part of their statement. We urge uncommitted voters to register anti-Trump voters and vote up and down the ballot. Our focus remains on building a broad anti-war coalition, both inside and outside the Democratic Party. Pro-war forces like AIPAC want to drive us out of the Democratic Party. We're here to stay. Movements have long worked to rid the Democratic Party of hateful forces, segregationists, anti-union, anti-choice, and anti-LGBTQ proponents, the NRA, big oil, and we will work in that legacy to rid our party of AIPAC's pro-war extremism. Building on the work of Uncommitted, we invite stakeholders to the Democratic Party, in the Democratic Party coalition, progressive civil rights, labor, racial justice, reproductive rights, climate, immigrant rights, disability rights, people of faith, young people, and more to join us in our campaign to push our Democratic leadership to align with the majority of Democratic voters who support the urgent call to for a stop to illegal and morally reprehensible weapons transfers through our campaign, not another bomb, both now and in the next administration. They also said they do not endorse a third party candidate. But they do not explicitly endorse Kamala Harris because of her refusal to pivot enough from Joe Biden's stance, and again in the form of delivering weapons after more weapon shipments. But I really like that part of their statement because it's like, it really shows me hope as someone who got into politics, radical politics through the Iraq War and my anti-war stance. It's like we've needed an anti-war wing of the Democratic Party for so long. It has inspired some of the biggest movements in our lifetimes. And we deserve to transform this Uncommitted movement into an anti-war movement. It is on its face, Josh, I'm not going to lie, I was slightly disappointed hearing that they weren't endorsing Harris. But then reading about it and really understanding it and then seeing the reality, you're like, yeah, man, I don't see how they can. Go ahead.
I think this is like an interesting and principled statement that will make almost everyone mad. Because I think, I think there are people who will say they should endorse Kamala Harris because a Harris presidency will be better for more people and harmful for fewer people than a Trump presidency. And I certainly agree with that logic. I think there's also people who will say, when it says we urge you to register anti-Trump wink, wink, wink votes up and down the ballot. I think there will be people on that side who go like, well, we know what that means though, right? Like we know who the alternative is, especially because they're like, not a third party, like anti-Trump, but also not a third party. So it is like kind of clear that level of pragmatism, right? Because I do think an uncommitted vote in a primary is a different ball game than a third party vote in a general election.
And it's a different ball game in a general election where Kamala Harris is the nominee and not Joe Biden. And it's very interesting. I don't think Biden would ever change course when it comes. I think he's proven he will never change course.
I think that's true.
But I'm also curious because arguably he would need these votes in key swing states more than Kamala Harris seems like she needs them. If Kamala Harris loses in some of these key swing states, specifically where there's an Arab and Muslim community, it's like, we all know fucking why. And it's also because you, again, from the start of the show, have there not been enough like real meaningful outreach to the Arab and Muslim communities who are hurting, who are in the crosshairs, whose family members are being killed. But anyway, all to say that perhaps she's just riding her, the energy and like, ironically, the very thing that maybe booted, in my opinion, Biden out of the race in the first place is also what is allowing Kamala Harris to not have to address this issue. Do you know what I'm saying? Like their power has dwindled now that Kamala Harris is the nominee because
the push was not Biden essentially at first, right? The uncommitted vote. That's what an uncommitted vote, or to push Biden to make a different and better choice.
Right. And I think that because she's getting so much more, there's so much more excitement that the key votes that she would need from these uncommitted voters are not as key anymore because her support is so strong.
The tide is rising. Yeah. I mean, I was at a rally maybe a month and a half ago, and people from the uncommitted movement were speaking, I thought, very movingly about people say we're trying to sink the Harris Walz ticket. That's not what they were saying. We, meaning the speaker, they're saying what we're trying to do is to give them the opportunity to earn our trust. And I thought that really made sense. And so to say like, look, you didn't do the thing that we were asking, I understand that. But then I think the pragmatic statement of we are against Trump. This
Right.
is not, we're not saying vote against Kamala Harris. We're saying Trump is bad. Don't vote for him.
Right.
Don't vote for the third party candidate. But like and I think it's a really tough situation. Like you were saying earlier, I'm sorry to ramble as we go
No.
along, but like, I think it's a really difficult situation because I really do think that like, that a Donald Trump presidency, a second Donald Trump presidency, would continue to throw vulnerable people to the wolves in just increasing, escalating, uncaring numbers. And I think like it doesn't help a ton to be like, yeah, I guess I'll vote for Kamala Harris, but it fucking sucks. Cause it's like,
Right.
well, do you want this? Do you prefer this outcome or don't you? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
I think that kind of like, and I'm not saying this about the Uncommitted movement, just like individual people that I've spoken to. And I'm like, I'll just circle back and say, I do think there is something powerful in going like, they didn't get where we wanted to go. However, the alternative is worse, and we urge you to fight against the alternative.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's a non-endorsement, and that's a solid non-endorsement of like, we understand the greater threat, but also this person specifically for this community. And it isn't just Arab and Muslims. It's people who cannot, bring themselves and who've been rightfully horrified by everything that they've seen, and it's a hard line to walk. I mean, I am someone who is squarely said, we need to beat Trump. We need, we cannot fuck around. But I understand, I understand not being able to bring yourself. I don't actually, I have to say, I don't personally understand not being able to bring myself not to vote for Kamala Harris, but I understand that can be a position.
Yeah. When there are people that are like, this issue has been too painful for me to do it.
Yeah.
I understand that where that comes from, even though I think that it is the better outcome is voting for, is a vote for the Harrison Walz ticket that would again mitigate the harm. And I
Right.
it's at this point, it is a binary choice. There isn't another replacement candidate that we're going to get this time.
Yeah, exactly. But sort of in the same vein of Uncommitted, but sort of Uncommitted on a celebrity level.
Yeah.
Chappell Roan, obviously Midwestern princess, pop star who's risen to massive fame this summer, has come out with a statement, or she was being interviewed by The Guardian and basically said she doesn't really feel like either candidate. She doesn't feel like she needs to endorse anybody because she, quote, has so many issues with our government in every way. There are so many things I would want to change. So I don't feel pressured to endorse someone. There's problems on both sides. I encourage people to use your critical thinking skills, use your vote small, vote for what's going on in your city. The change she wants to see in the US in this election year, she says instantly, is trans rights. They cannot have cis people making decisions for trans people, period. So I appreciate that. And obviously, again, I think for those of you folks who are like, well, obviously Trump's going to be worse for trans people. I mean, yes, that's absolutely correct.
For sure.
But, and this is maybe more to the point, Chappell Roan has also been outspoken around Palestine. She has donated part of the proceeds of some merchandise to aid for Palestine. She said, it is my duty to help send resources to a community that's absolutely being destroyed. And, and this is also someone whose own songs have been used by the Harris campaign to sell merchandise themselves. They came out with a hat that was in the stylings of the Midwestern princess Chappell Roan hat that says Harris Walz. And it's like, so people are hounding her on this, like, not, how dare you not come out? But I'm like, nah, man, she's a young singer who's seeing what we're all seeing. Everyone, I think, knows as like an openly queer woman also like where she stands in the whole fascism versus no fascism stance, but also this is a little bit of a fuck you. This is a little bit of a like, nah, man, you haven't done anything other than kind of bite off my style to earn my vote in any particular way.
Yeah, I have a hard time. I just feel like she's really going through it in the public eye right now.
Yeah.
And it's I understand. Again, because I really do like her and think she is like a compelling, thoughtful person. But I think when you say things like, you know, the whole government is the problem, man, is like, I
It's
think
a
that,
little.
you know, it just doesn't, I think she's been being put in a position where like, it's just really tough right
Yeah.
now. And
Well, I think
and
oh, sorry, keep going.
no,
You
I was just
finish.
gonna say, like, I think she, like you said, she's been outspoken with her values. But again, I wish she had used, not even like, I want her to do better. I just wish, like, for the sake of this conversation of people like really beating up on her, I wish she had been a little bit more thorough in saying like what the problems are, rather
Yes.
than just like, it's the fucking government, dude.
Yes, and I think that it is easy when you are surrounded by like-minded people, young people, progressives, leftists, queer people, like you are largely, and good for you, insulated from this like toxic discussion that's happening, which is when people say both sides, it is like code for kind of like I've morally flattened Trump
Yeah, I think that's a
and
great way to
Harris.
put it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, so it's what it sounds like she's saying is she's both sidesing it, which I think a lot of people are interpreting it as,
Which I don't think that's what she means.
right, which I don't think she is what she means. And just to play you a little, not play you, but this is what she said at a concert. She's dressed as Statue of Liberty, and this is the vibe, y'all.
I am in drag of the biggest queen of all. But in case you had forgotten what's etched on my pretty little toes, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. That means freedom and trans rights. That means freedom and women's rights. And it especially means freedom for all people and oppressed. It especially means freedom for all oppressed people in occupied territories.
So there she is. I mean, she doesn't say Palestine, but she effectively does.
Yeah, and she's talked about Palestine before. I think she, like, her politics are not opaque, but I do, I think that answer to that question in that instance was like, I think it's possible to not even take it out of context, but not bring in a broad enough context for people to have given her the benefit of the doubt, that don't necessarily know her politics in that way.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's dumb to look to celebrities, and we will see. She may clarify what she meant. She may change her tune. I mean, we are like 41 days out from the election. It is insane, and it is important to actually keep your eye on like a bigger picture. So at once, I think it's stupid to look to her. I also think it's important in some ways, but I also like really just don't want to sound like an older scoldy like
No,
boomer.
I don't. And I don't feel, I don't feel scoldy about it. Like, I think it's really tough to be, I imagine, becoming household name famous within a year and being put on the spot for stuff like this, and maybe not yet having your ready-made soundbitey versions of your politics,
right?
Because like, you're like, I'm a singer and I'm pretty clear about what I think, but to not have the interview version of that,
it's hard for me, dude. I mean, especially if her politics are left, you know what I mean? Like, they're clearly more left than like Taylor Swift. It's like,
for sure,
it is a hard thing to talk about when you don't see yourself represented, or you don't see like what your hopes and dreams represented. It is a fucking terrible not terrible, but it's a general election. So anyway, that's Chappell Roan. That has been Endorsement Enforcement. Very, very fun segment. And you've been Josh Gondelman. Josh, where can people find you, follow your work, watch your special?
Yeah, I have a special out that's I think you can watch it. You can kind of stream it wherever you can like rent and buy things. I think it's free on a couple places. And then I have a new one coming out soon, but to be determined. And then I have a newsletter that I write every week called That's Marvelous. And it's joshgondelman.substack.com. It's fun. It's full of pep talks. And it's the best place to find out all your Josh Gondelman related news, including special releases and tour dates.
Awesome. Amazing. I love it. That's marvelous. Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you, everybody. Woo, what a long show. Paige is freaking out, and I appreciate Paige for keeping us on time. Bing Buddha, a member on YouTube, says, we'll hit 100K before the election. People, can we get this channel on YouTube to 100,000 subscribers, please? We're about 87. That's nothing to sneeze at, but it would be so fun. Maybe at least by the end of the year. But if you haven't subscribed on YouTube, youtube.com/FrannyFio would be awesome. Chris Corcoran calling Diddy the Diddler. Indeed. Tony Barbosa, thank you for that. Super chat from Brazil. Todd Roy requests a Frantifa mug. Okay. Z Corp Alpha says, I'm going to take you to coffee. All right. Sounds good. And let's see. Paul on YouTube says, in her Mother Jones interview, Kamala promised to prosecute oil companies for disinformation. I hope, unless, as Daniel Lee says, oil will kill us all first. Count Juan on YouTube says, I worked for Chevron and other petro projects once upon a lifetime ago. They are not only as evil as you think, they are worse. Thank you. And Weldon Dragon, thank you so much. Being left is so nuanced. Ugh, I hate it. It's true. It is true. Solar Flare says Willow Project MVP, Seaport Oil Terminal, no positions against Line 3 and Line 5, and record levels of leasing and drilling. That's the Biden-Harris legacy on climate so far. Yeah, I mean, exactly. And then you sort of, mitigate that with little tax incentives here and there. But those tax incentives also go to corporations who are also, harbingers of the climate apocalypse. So it all kind of comes full circle. It is kind of all fuckery around the edges. But with that, people, gosh, do we have... All right, we don't have any new patrons at $10 or more, so you don't get this shout out in the fart song, but I'm going to play it anyway to thank some new members and other folks. Let's go over to Twitch. Thank you so much, Hello Lovely Scientist, for subscribing. 7 months strong. Night Owl Moon, subscribe with Prime. Welcome. Omega Shenron Dragon, 11 months strong. And Jassim23, subscribe with Prime. This was a little bit ago. And I will just thank everyone who works on this show. That fart song ended early, but see, that's what happens when you don't become a patron at $10 or more. The fart song ends early and everyone is sad. Thank you to Paige Omek, to Maximilian Inhofe, to Andy Vasoyan. We stream Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays. Remember, Wednesday's that bonus episode. youtube.com/FrannyFio or twitch.tv/FrannyFio. Find us on all the socials. Bitchuation Room on Twitter, Bitchuation Pod on Twitter, Bitchuation Room on TikTok and Instagram. And until next time, remember to fight the power, fuck the patriarchy, free Palestine, and don't just bitch about it, be about it. Bye.